The envelope appeared between the orange juice and the bread basket. Felix didn't say anything when he slid it across the white linen. He used 2 fingers, the way you'd pass the salt. Casual, unhurried, like this was the most ordinary gesture in the world. I looked at the envelope. I looked at him. He smiled. Not a warm smile. The other kind. The one he used when he'd already calculated the outcome and was simply waiting for it to arrive. I'd learned that smile over 9 years of marriage. I'd been studying it carefully for the last 7 months. The room around us was full. His parents, Bernard and Ingrid, sat to his left. His 2 business associates, Patrick Hale and Diana Foss, were across from me. Our mutual friends, the Wentworths, were at the curved end of the table. A server was refilling glasses at the sideboard. The Magnolia Room at Hartley Country Club had good acoustics. Every sound carried. Felix knew that. He'd booked this room specifically. He picked up his coffee cup, leaned back, comfortable in the way that people are comfortable when they believe they've already won. "Open it," he said. So I did. "My name is Vera Aldgate. I'm 43 years old. I'm a structural architect, not the kind who designs beautiful kitchens and selects tile samples. I design load-bearing systems. I figure out what's holding a structure up before anyone else touches it. I read buildings the way other people read faces, looking for the invisible stress points, the hairline fractures, the places where things will give before they give. That skill, it turns out, has uses outside the office." Felix and I had been married for 9 years. He was a real estate developer, and a genuinely good one. The kind of man who walked into a room and immediately became its center of gravity. He had a name in this city, a reputation. People returned his calls before the first ring finished. So did I, just differently. We'd built a clean life together in Pemberton Heights, 4-bedroom house, shared account for household expenses, separate accounts for personal ones. The separate accounts were my idea. Felix agreed to it immediately the first time I brought it up, without question or negotiation. I should have noticed how easily he agreed. We had no children, by mutual decision. We traveled twice a year. We knew the same people. We moved in the same circles. And for the first 6 years, I believed we were building the same thing. Then, 7 months ago, things began to shift. Quietly. The way foundations shift, imperceptible on the surface until the walls start to show lines. I noticed. I always notice. 7 months ago, I found a document I wasn't looking for. I wasn't snooping. Felix and I shared a cloud folder for joint expense tracking. Organized, efficient, practical. I was looking for a contractor invoice. I clicked the wrong subfolder. There was a lease agreement. A luxury apartment on Callaway Street. 2 bedrooms, full amenity building, one of the nicer addresses in the Meridian District. Felix's name was listed as guarantor. The tenant's name was Celeste Armand. I closed the folder. I didn't call him. I didn't confront him. I didn't cry, at least not that night. I sat in my home office for a long time, looking at the structural drawings on the wall, blueprints I'd made, buildings I'd helped build, and I thought about something I tell junior architects during their first site assessments. Before you touch a single beam, understand the full load. So I waited, and I watched. What I watched was this. Felix had been quietly rewriting the story of our marriage in public, in rooms I wasn't in, at dinners I wasn't invited to, through comments so small they barely registered until you saw them as a collection. Vera's been under a lot of strain lately, said with a sigh, not a complaint. You know how she gets. Said with a small, affectionate-seeming shake of the head. I try, but she makes things harder than they have to be. Said in a tone that implied he was still trying. 7 months of that. Slow, methodical, consistent. He was building a case. I didn't know yet what it was for. Then, 4 months ago, I found out about Celeste. Not who she was with Felix. Who she was without him. Our city has a professional design community, architects, interior stylists, property consultants, event coordinators. We circulate the same directories, the same industry forums, The same professional boards. Everyone knows of everyone, even when they haven't met. Celeste Armand worked in that world as a property stylist. She staged apartments for high-end listings. She consulted on interior decisions for developers and landlords who wanted their properties to photograph well and sell faster. She was good at surfaces. Genuinely skilled at surfaces. She appeared in a professional forum I followed, a question about sourcing sustainable cladding materials. She'd seen my firm's name on a project. She reached out. Friendly, professional, brief. We exchanged 3 messages about material vendors. I didn't think anything of it. Then, 3 months ago, she sent me a private message through the forum. I am certain she did not mean to send it to me. It was addressed informally, the way you write to someone you've been talking to already, not someone you've just met professionally. It referenced a timeline, a plan, an arrangement, and a name. Edmund Hale. Edmund Hale is a property investor. Old money, wealthy. Not the kind that announces itself, the kind that doesn't have to. He funds development projects and sits on charitable boards and appears at industry events as the person everyone else is quietly angling to speak with. The message Celeste sent me, clearly intended for someone else, said this, and I saved it word for word. The Callaway arrangement is holding. F is useful, but he doesn't understand he's the buffer, not the plan. Once the Hale thing solidifies, I won't need the apartment covered. He's a temporary problem, not a future. Felix is a temporary problem, not a future. I read it 4 times. Then I printed it. Then I kept going. Over the next 6 weeks, I gathered everything I could without making a single phone call or tipping a single hand. I found a time-stamped photograph taken at the Hargrove Design Expo of Celeste Armand and Edmund Hale at a private dinner, her hand on his arm. His name badge visible at the collar, their posture telling a story anyone could read. I found an email chain between Celeste and an expo event coordinator confirming her attendance as Edmund Hale's personal guest and requesting they be seated away from general press. I found a second message she'd sent through the same forum, this one to someone whose screen name I recognized as a mutual contact, that referenced Felix by initial again, saying only, the F situation is temporary. The Hale arrangement is what matters. I have a timeline. I organized everything into a plain manila folder. I labeled nothing on the outside. I put it in my bag. I waited for the right moment. Felix gave me one. Inside the envelope was a printed bank wire request. Formally typed, an account number, an amount, a memo line at the bottom that read, Callaway Street, Unit 4B, renewal support. 3 months of rent. For Celeste's apartment. Felix watched me read it. When I raised my eyes, he was composed. He'd rehearsed this. I could tell by the way he held his posture. Not tense, just set, like someone who'd practiced staying still. It's a property matter, he said. Volume calibrated. Quiet enough to seem private, present enough to be heard. I need you to handle it. We discussed expanding into secondary investment properties. We had never discussed that. Felix? It's straightforward. He set down his fork, looked at me with an expression that was almost patient. I think it's time you stepped up and acted like a supportive wife. I've carried a significant portion of this household. I'm asking for one thing. Ingrid, his mother, set her coffee cup in its saucer with a small, deliberate click. Felix is right, she said. Her voice was the exact temperature it had always been with me. Not cold, but never warm. It doesn't seem like an unreasonable ask. I looked at Patrick Hale across the table. He was studying his plate. I looked at the Wentworths. Catherine Wentworth gave me a look I couldn't quite decode. Not unkind, but helpless. Felix leaned slightly forward. This is simple, Vera, he said. You handle this, we move forward together. Or you don't. He picked up his glass, set it back down. Pay it or lose me. That's all this is. And when this marriage ends, everyone in this room will know it was you who destroyed the marriage. There it was. 7 months of groundwork. A room full of witnesses. A story already half told in their minds, by every careful comment Felix had made over the preceding months. The difficult wife. The cold wife. The unreasonable one who finally made things impossible. All he needed now was for me to either write the check in humiliation or cause a scene that confirmed everything he'd said about me. The table was quiet. The server at the sideboard had stopped moving. Everyone was waiting. I didn't respond right away. That bothered him. I could see it in a small tightening around his eyes, the kind of adjustment a face makes when a calculation comes back wrong. People who have staged a confrontation need you to react. The plan only functions if you follow the script, break down or argue or comply. Any of those options gives him the scene he came here to film. I folded the wire request, set it beside my water glass, and I asked the only question that mattered. Is this the life you're choosing in front of everyone? His expression shifted, just briefly. He hadn't prepared for that particular sentence. Too calm, too direct, no emotion at its edges for him to work with. I'm not choosing anything, he said. I'm presenting you with a decision. Okay, I said. He exhaled, relaxed, reached for his fork. That was his second mistake. I reached into my bag. No performance in it, just a hand going into a bag and coming back out with something. I placed the plain manila folder on the table in front of me. Felix looked at it. What is that? Context, I said. I opened it. 3 pages. Arranged face up. Side by side. The printed screenshot of the private message Celeste sent me by mistake. F is useful, but he doesn't understand he's the buffer, not the plan. He's a temporary problem, not a future. The time-stamped photograph from the Hargrove Expo. Celeste and Edmund Hale. Private dinner table. Her hand on his arm. His name badge facing the camera. The email chain confirming Celeste's attendance at the same expo as Edmund Hale's personal guest, with a request to be seated away from press. I placed them on the white linen and stepped back from them. Felix stared at the photograph. Ingrid said, "What is this supposed to be?" I didn't look at her. I kept my eyes on Felix. He picked up the message printout, read it, set it down carefully, the way you set something down when your hands have suddenly forgotten how they work. He picked up the photograph. His jaw moved slightly, like he was forming a word he didn't say. Patrick Hale across the table had gone completely still. Diana Foss was watching Felix with an expression she was working to keep neutral. Catherine Wentworth had stopped pretending to look anywhere else. "This doesn't," Felix started. "This is out of context, Vera. You've taken something and built." "She called you a temporary problem," I said. My voice was level. I wasn't performing levelness. I was simply past the part where any of this could make me shake. She said, "You don't understand that you're the buffer, not the plan." Ingrid looked at her son, not at me, at him. "Felix," she said. One word, but the temperature of it had changed. He tried to pivot. That's what Felix did under pressure. He reframed, he redirected, he found a new angle. He said Celeste was a professional contact in a deal he was managing. He said I had clearly misunderstood the nature of a private business exchange. He said this was exactly the kind of thing he'd been telling people about, the way I took neutral information and made it into something it wasn't. But Patrick Hale hadn't moved. Patrick Hale was staring at the photograph. I watched him and understood something. Patrick recognized the man in that photograph, because the man in that photograph was Edmund Hale. And while I hadn't known the specific connection until I saw Patrick's face in that moment, I had suspected there was one. Because Patrick and Edmund shared a last name, had appeared in the same industry directories, had once been mentioned together in a trade publication about a regional development deal. Patrick said, quietly, to no one in particular, Edmund Hale is the lead investor on the North Point project. The table went silent. Felix turned to look at him. He's been in meetings with Felix for 3 months, Patrick continued. Not accusatory, just informational. The way a person speaks when they're watching a structure fail in real time and have no useful intervention to offer. If this woman is... He stopped, looked at the photograph again, If she's been coordinating with Edmund while Felix is... He didn't finish. He didn't need to. Because everyone at that table could complete the sentence. Felix had not simply taken a mistress. The woman he'd installed in that apartment, the woman he'd come to this brunch to pressure his wife into funding, had been using him. She had positioned herself close to his largest investor while letting Felix pay her rent. She had called him a buffer. She had given him a timeline he didn't know he was on. The confident husband who had assembled this brunch to publicly shame his wife into compliance had been publicly played by the woman he'd chosen over her. And the sympathy campaign he'd spent 7 months constructing, every careful comment, every small sigh, every version of Vera he'd quietly installed in the minds of the people at this table, had just detonated in the Magnolia Room at Hartley Country Club. In front of the exact audience he gathered to destroy her. I gathered my 3 pages, aligned them, closed the folder. I picked up the wire request and set it on Felix's bread plate. "You brought this," I said. "It belongs with you." I stood. I straightened my jacket. I looked around the table at Ingrid, at Bernard, at Patrick, at Diana, at the Wentworths, at the server in the doorway who had not moved in several minutes. "Thank you all for coming," I said. "The rest of the meal is on us. Please enjoy it." I picked up my bag, and I walked out of the Magnolia Room. Not fast, not slow, just steadily, in the direction I'd already decided on. By Tuesday of the following week, Felix's North Point development was under a due diligence review. Edmund Hale's firm had submitted what their legal team called a precautionary assessment request, formal language for, "We have concerns that require answers before we commit further capital." Patrick had made a phone call. I don't know exactly what he said. I don't know the full shape of what he knew before that brunch, or what he confirmed afterward. What I know is that Edmund Hale was not a man who invested carelessly, and the discovery that the woman with access to his private calendar and his investment plans had been living in an apartment guaranteed by the project lead, paid for under the framing of a property investment that Felix's own wife hadn't agreed to, was not information that anyone's legal team could sit with comfortably. Celeste Armand's professional forum profile went private within the week. Then it disappeared entirely. Felix did not get the wire transfer. He did not get the humiliation scene. He did not get the room full of witnesses watching his wife fall apart. What he got was a table full of people who watched him slide a bill for another woman's apartment across a white linen tablecloth, and discovered, before his wife had even stood up to leave, that the woman he'd chosen had been using him to get somewhere else. The sympathy campaign collapsed in a single morning. Because that is what happens when you build your strategy around controlling the audience and forget to verify the evidence. The quietest person in the room is not always the most powerless one. Sometimes she's the one who's been paying the closest attention, reading the load, mapping the stress points, waiting for the moment when the truth doesn't need to be argued because it simply needs to be placed on the table. Vera didn't win by being louder. She won by being more prepared. And the most important thing she did, maybe, was decide that the right time to speak is the moment when it actually matters. If this one hit different, hit that like button and leave a comment. I read every single one, and I genuinely want to know what you think. Subscribe if you're new here, because this is exactly the kind of story we tell every week. And if someone in your life needs a reminder that staying calm is not the same as staying quiet, send them this. I'll see you in the next one.